Hey, what's up, everybody? This is King Von Jr. of the Victorious Ones podcast, a place where gaming meets comics, meets sports, meets movies, as well as inspiration. Of course, once again, it's a simple form. I'm your host, King Von Jr. You can follow me on social media on Twitter/X at 301 King Von Jr. You can follow me you can follow the show's Twitter page at Victory Pod 1. You can also follow me on Instagram at Mr. King Von Jr. You can follow the show's Instagram page at Victorious Ones Podcast. I'm also the social media producer for the unpopular review, wrestling show Perfect Plex Talk Radio. Of course, hosted by Mike Knox on Mondays at 6 p.m. Let's switch this up. Sorry about the short notice. But I had something else that was at early, previously. I just came back from, and had a great time. And so, of course, I had this on for a reason because I'm definitely going to get down to business when it comes to this whole, this upcoming weekend, the Night of Champions, King and Queen of the Ring. You know what I mean? And so, of course, I'm going to give my predictions. I'm also going to, go talk about the John Cena pipe bomb as he did a reverse Uno on CM Punk. You know what I mean? And so as far as that, and also I'm going to take some pointers from the Perfect Plex episode that Mike and I had on Monday. We're going to, as I talked about, as far as greatness, in terms of those who have the case to be the GOAT in in a particular field, and also the BRP 50. My thoughts about, especially since they revealed the top 10, and and just of course congratulations. I'm going to congratulations to the number one spot that I'm going to reveal in a minute. But also another thing is the reason why I'm wearing this shirt. You know what I mean? Because a king himself who's no longer with us, the late great Kobe Bean Bryant. Shout out to the Force Lab for this amazing shirt. I've worn this numerous times on this podcast. But the reason why I'm wearing this is because, like I said, it's definitely like this. Something. His name has been in the headlines lately. You know what I mean? In terms of being a particular top, subject of discussion among NBA circles, and not exactly in the best light. And just. I guess I have to reinforce, just the depth, with it, in terms of what I talked about before when it comes to greatness, because of LeBron's comments about rings, and people just, lost their mind and flipped out and crashed out about it. But like I said, I'm gonna get to that in a moment. But of course, actually, you know what? Like I said, I guess I'm gonna go either way doesn't matter at this point. But yes, so of course, I'm going to talk about as far as Friday Night SmackDown. In terms of the King of the Ring tournament. I guess I'm doing things a little bit different. Usually I start off with other stuff before I talk about wrestling. But it's all going to work together. All things work together, right? But anyway, of course, as far as Friday Night SmackDown. Some of the notable moments, in terms of the King of the Ring tournament, is that Randy Orton defeated Sami Zayn in the King of the Ring semifinals. Asuka defeated Alexa Bliss in the Queen of the Ring semifinals. Braun Breaker and Bronson Reed faced off against LA Knight, and were ultimately unsuccessful due to a chair attack by LA Knight. And some of the more notable moments for SmackDown were that Aleister Black attacked Kid Wilson and called out John Cena. We saw that Jimmy Uso assisted Logan Paul during his match. Nia Jax and Tiffany Stratton continued their feud as Nia challenged Stratton to a last woman standing match next week. For Night of Champions, and so that's going to be, definitely going to be a doozy, if you will. It's something that Nia is not exactly used to, and I feel as though this Nia and Tiffany feud might be time to. Time to mic drop it and probably put an exclamation point on it at this point, especially when it comes to a last woman standing match. Just like that match, like stipulations like that are usually around pretty much the culmination of a feud. If it's not a Hell in a Cell match, WrestleMania match, anything like that, that is one of those culminating matches, I believe. I'd be surprised if they continue the feud after this. But of course, once this other Bianca Belair came out and confronted both Naomi and Jade, and of course we saw that. So as far as that, but of course the biggest moment, the most notable moment of I'll say like this, like I said, the most notable moment, other than Johnson and Cody, returning to have a confrontation, which escalated into a brawl with Logan Paul and Jey Uso. The most notable moment, as far as this past Friday, was when John Cena put CM Punk to a table and recreated Punk's legendary pipe bomb promo. Which was, can you believe it's been 14 years since Punk delivered that promo, and so as far as that, I mean, it's just in terms of what that meant. And on Monday, on Perfect Plex, of course, Mike had a comparison, had a discussion in terms of which pipe bomb was better between John Cena and CM Punk, and so he had his reasons and picked John Cena, for his various reasons, just because John Cena, as a is more GOAT than CM Punk is, right? And and also I guess because of where Cena is in his career versus where Punk was in his. But I will actually contend with that and make my case and say that I firmly believe that CM Punk, in my estimation, had the better. Well, it was really, when it comes to Punk and Cena, it's more of a masterclass when it comes to their mic work. I mean, they're both very skilled and very talented when it comes to the gift of gab. I mean, and so on. Like I said, when it comes to doing a thing on like on the microphone in terms of just connecting with the audience and talking them into the building. Punk and Cena are among the very best of all time to ever do it. You know what I mean? And so, like I said, they have. And the thing is, I remember Cena in an interview said that that usually when he talks, it's more so to create a conversation. Whether it is interviewing somebody else, doing an open-ended question in terms of, in terms of getting to know them, getting to know his subject who's talking to a little bit more and everything like that. Or also like it may be a situation where he's asking rhetorical questions so that he can, like I said, so he can get them engaged or whatever, or just like. Bottom line is, no matter what, Cena's main objective is to be a storyteller and to create a conversation. And so with this one, this is definitely what he did, and for him to turn the tables, no pun intended, on CM Punk after he put him through the table, right? And to do it the way that he did, I mean, it was, like I said, it was definitely a masterclass. And the way that he had the callback, when CM Punk sat down, before Cena just sound the turnbuckle, but versus when Punk sat up at the ramp and of course and just read Cena for filth, broke the fourth wall. Of course he mentioned Colt Cabana, someone who's outside of WWE. You know what I mean? And as far as that and in that aspect, as far as like just mention somebody that the fans, that the WWE audience had no clue about. And so in Cena's case, we wanted to mention Claudio Castagnoli, also known as Cesaro, Matt Cardona, formerly known as Zack Ryder, like Cena, just a number of other people that they're not in the company or part of the independent circuit, with other companies and stuff like that. And for him to blatantly say, look at this smile camera, be like, hey, I'm breaking the fourth wall. I thought that was pretty cool. So, for him to almost line for line, bar for bar, copy and paste, what Punk did, and use it against him. It's like taking a sword, flipping around, and using it against the original owner, right? And so that's what Cena did with that. With that being said, though, I would still give a slight edge, straight edge, slight edge, whatever. I still give the advantage in my estimation to CM Punk. But um, the reason why I say Punk is because his was more cutting edge at the time. It was something where he was legit airing his grievances. I'm not saying that Cena doesn't have his own issues or gripes or whatever, but I feel like this is more so in the confines of him still being a heel and just checking this off the box and really and being very convincing about it. This is probably the best. I would say this is the best uh, heel promo that Cena has cut since he has made this turn. But when it came to CM Punk, this was not some kayfabe. This was like a legit, frustration when he was really airing his grievances. And this is at a point where he was very unsure about his future, right? So those are natural, real, straight up emotions where, even though this was a shoot, but Vince found a way to to blend it into to work in terms of the storyline, in terms of him, of course he was him threatening to take the belt to the Indies, to Ring of Honor, New Japan, whatever, just mentioning companies outside of the WWE world, right? Companies that Vince normally would have, on their forbidden list, right? And so CM Punk, broke the fourth wall like Deadpool, and and mentioned talent, and and other companies that that Vince would normally not even give the time of day on his program. And and like I say, just because of the place where Punk was in as far as his career, and another thing about that pipe bomb was that the ultimate payoff, the ultimate payoff was that Punk became the WWE champion. You know what I mean? And so of course, in that end, in terms of the aftermath of it, it was an immediate aftermath. He became the champion and he beat Cena. You know what I mean? And not only, but also because of the fact that it was in Chicago. Punk is seen as a echelon, almost like a superhero type of thing. Like next to, right next to the likes of Michael Jordan, Walter Payton. You know what I mean? If you want to throw Mike Singletary after that, or something like that. CM Punk, is up there in terms of almost like that rarefied air. You know what I mean? It's just like he's notch two beneath where they are. And so, like I said, because of that, and like I said, with all those circumstances, I think Punk's pipe bomb had a bigger cultural impact, right? I thought it was very fascinating that Cena would use that, that Cena would rip that page out of Punk's book like that. I thought it was, very interesting. But like I said, but he still found a way to make it work. You know what I mean? And so, of course, right before that, of course, Cena and R-Truth apparently wrote the last chapter in the rivalry, which with a match like this. And so, of course, this is what ultimately led to, ultimately lead to Cena delivering ultimately lead to Cena's pipe bomb, which is fascinating because back in 2011, when Punk delivered the pipe bomb, it was in the middle of a match that Cena had with R-Truth, and Cena ended up going through the table himself in order for R-Truth to win, right? And so now, fast forward 14 years later, history repeats itself. But instead of Cena being put through the table in an R-Truth match, it's Punk that gets put through a table. You know what I mean? So it's just like, it's funny how history rewrites itself, repeats itself, and rewrites itself all in the same time. So in terms of say history being repeated, because of the pipe bomb, or rather it's being repeated because the same the same chess pieces in this. These are same players that were there back in 2011. It's like the exact same names, right? So like that's repeat. But the way it's being rewritten is that is that instead of Cena being in the table, like just laying out, being laid out, is Punk that's in that position himself, explaining that the right way. But of course, R-Truth won by way of disqualification, and and so like I say, much like how he won, but much like how he won, I believe the same way he won, like I said, against Cena back at that time. So it's funny how things come back full circle. You know what I mean? It's almost like a what if episode. You know what I mean? So as far as that, and so like I said, and of course when it comes to the qualifying matches, it's Oscar defeated Alexa Bliss. You know what I mean? Like I said, as far as that, like I said, we saw that Ron Killings, of course, once again, had another crash out, and and also, Cody didn't even speak at all. You know what I mean? And I was like, it's very interesting. And of course, like I said, Randy Orton, of course, defeats Sami Zayn in the semifinals to advance to the finals, and not only that, but Naomi had a near miss when it came to her cash in, and so of course, moments after Tiffany Stratton interrupted Nia Jax's promo, coming face to face with her, and announced the last one, a standing match for next Friday. Of course, he said that the Irresistible Force 9 laid out Tiffany and just of course laid out Tiffany Stratton with multiple leg drops, and so she stood there and just stood over her arch enemy, her nemesis, and so looking to cash in on pun intended, looking to capitalize. Naomi rushed the ring with a Money in the Bank briefcase, looking to cash in, only for Nia Jackson put a stop to it. And of course, there's an argument on the outside with Tiffany, just laying there. And so we had a shallow tease of a segment that revealed another showdown between Tiffany and Nia, in a rivalry that's really lost momentum. And it doesn't really mean that much. And of course, we see Charlotte Flair versus Chelsea Green, and the winner of this match by way of the figure 8, Charlotte Flair. And Charlotte definitely dodged a bullet, because with the way Piper Niven landed on her, that was a close call, because that could have really, really gotten bad. But I guess Charlotte must be the real Emma Frost, because she's got to be made out of diamond not to have broken after the Secret Herbist Piper Niven landed on her like that. And I was like, man, it was definitely that was up on me by surprise. And of course, Alexa Bliss Alexa Bliss made the save, clearing the ring and leaving her and Charlotte to stare each other down. But of course, Charlotte still doesn't trust her. Like I say, of course, we saw that Solo Sikoa called out Jacob Fatu. So we still calling for Jacob to say I love you, Solo. Of course, Solo said I love you, Jacob, and he demanded him to say it back. Of course, Jacob's definitely not saying that back, especially after you heard heard what Solo said in the tail about him. Like just playing in his face, just talking crazy. So so as far as that, of course, we're gonna have the U.S. title match at Night of Champions, and This is definitely a very shaky situation when it comes to the timing of Night of Champions and the location of it. But in WWE, typical WWE fashion, we know that the show must still go on. So that's one thing that, that Paul Levesque, aka also Triple H, that's a cue that he's definitely taken from his father-in-law, Vincent Kennedy McMahon. Of course, regardless of the circumstances, regardless of everything that's going, that happens, in the climate of of reality, the show must still go on, right? I mean, WWE is the same company that was known for doing tribute to the troops for years for Christmas, going out to Afghanistan. We have missiles being launched, all the way on, all the way on the other end. So they're not used to going. I mean, they're used to going into war zones, so it's nothing new to them, But at the same time, with the way this climate is, the way this administration is, that's all another story. It's still a little surprising, a little gives off not really bringing too much of the room, but hey, it is what it is. WWE's good at WWE, as I like to say. And so when it comes to of course when it comes to Monday Night Raw, some of the more notable, let's see, of course, some of the more notable moments of Monday Night Raw were, of course, as far as the match card, we had, we had Jade Cargill versus Roxanne Perez in the Queen of the Ring semifinal. We had Cody Rhodes versus Jey Uso in the King of the Ring semifinal, and we also had the Women's Intercontinental Championship match with Bayley versus Becky Lynch. We saw Seth Rollins kicked off Raw, and being very long-winded. You know what I mean? And he took, let's say, right now he's taking some of the worst parts of Triple H's reign of terror. And what I mean by that, in terms of opening Raw with these long-winded segments and just just hogging up so much time, and it's just like of course the visionary claimed he's responsible for Roman Reigns. And CM Punk was only back because WWE wanted to know Rollins hate for him, and then Cody would not have been back had it not been for him. So he's taking all the credit for everything. To his credit, I will say that at least he's not wearing as many weird tacky suits as he did before. I guess the Hangman started to get a little bit more serious. Of course, Seth Rollins said that they're champions. Like Cena and Gunther believe they're at the top of the business, but ultimately Rollins is the end game. All right, whatever, you say so. But it's just like he definitely spoke with conviction, but it's just like it was still very, like Cena's still very, pretty much long-winded. At least not as excruciating as as Triple H's whole Reign of Terror promos, but still, it's still very unclear in terms of the course of where this group is headed. Recently, somebody made a tweet to rank all four of the other recent Paul Heyman guys, from Roman Reigns, Brock Lesnar, CM Punk, Seth Rollins, right? So in terms of, like the common denominator is Seth Rollins is always going to be number 4. He's always going to be dead last, and of course in comparison to those guys who really raised the bar when it comes to being Heyman guys. You know what I mean? And so, like I said, the common denominator is Seth Rollins always going to be the 4th. He's always going to be the one that's got to go. He is to the Heyman guys with WrestleMania 41. Is to these last 4 WrestleManias, right? Either way, consensus-wise, Mania 41 will always be ranked the lowest, in comparison to 40, 39, and 38, right? And so the same thing when it comes to Seth Rollins, right? So the way that I would rank, of course, the recent 4, more successful Paul Heyman guys. Number 1 is no brainer. It's Tribal Chief Roman Reigns. That's the number 1 Paul Heyman. Number 2, I'm gonna go with slight edge. I'm gonna go with Brock Lesnar, just because of, I mean, of course, with his, long running track record with Heyman, anyways, his history with Heyman and how he's won like most of his titles, with Heyman by his side, right, as his advocate. Yes, a multi-time WWE champion. Um, you know, broke the streak. Destroyed John Cena, suplexed him out of the main event for a while. It just, like I said, like it just his own reign of terror for being, Universal Champion for like 502 days, whatever. You know what I mean? So as far as that, like I said, Lesnar will be number 2. Number 3 will be CM Punk, 434 days as champion. You know what I mean? That speaks for itself. So, and a distant 4th place, we're going to go Seth Rollins. So at this point, I feel like no matter what comes out of this, Seth ain't breaking that ceiling when it comes to the previous Paul Heyman guys, that came before him, because they really raised the bar. You know what I mean? And so, of course, that's it's very long, but really kicked off with the Penta versus Braun Breaker match. Great match, and the exclamation point was was Braun's spear on Penta. I mean, he pretty much broke this dude in half for real. I mean, this was the meanest mid-flight spear that I've probably ever seen. At this point, when it comes to great spears, I know Goldberg is, is top of that food chain, but as far as I'm concerned, I think Braun Breaker his spear, I think, is eclipsed Goldberg's spear. Clearly, from a spear standpoint. If I had to rank spears, there's another ranking that they did on Twitter, ranking 4 spears between Braun Breaker, Goldberg, Roman Reigns, and Edge. I would say Braun Breaker. At this point now, I think I might have to go with Roman, just because there's something about his that just hits differently now. Then I'll go Goldberg. In a far distant 4th, I'm going with Edge. That's the way I see it. It was definitely a very electrifying finish between Braun Breaker and Penta. I mean, that was an incredible match. Then we have an unnecessary promo by Goldberg, talking about his last match. He said, "I'm going to be out of Gunther." Like, really, talking all that talk. He could barely walk. Out his knees and spine are pretty much made out of silicone, paper clips, and and thoughts and prayers at this point. You know what I mean? It's just like, come on now, like this dude is barely holding up. You know what I mean? Like, I mean, if anything, as far as I'm concerned, Goldberg's spine and his knees might as well be made out of, aluminum foil or paper mache or something like that. You know what I mean? Like, whatever you can think of, made out of copper, I guess. Because with the way he's barely able to stand up face to face with Gunther, it's just like, man, Gunther got to put this dude out of his misery and just call it a day. You know what I mean? But of course, Goldberg was the one who insisted to have this farewell tour, this last ride. He figured, hey, since Undertaker had his last ride, I might as well, have mine too. But newsflash, dude, you ain't Undertaker. You're not Undertaker. You know what I mean? Unfortunately, this dude almost killed Taker in the ring. But like I said, when it comes to which, in terms of overall importance, historical impact, legacy, longevity, accolades, all that type of stuff, Goldberg is not even in Undertaker's league. Undertaker earned that red carpet farewell treatment. You know what I mean? Not just for what he's done in WWE, but what he means to the wrestling landscape in general itself. You know what I mean? So Undertaker has earned that hero's farewell. Shawn Michaels earned his last ride as far as hero's farewell. You know what I mean? Goldberg, like I say, who are you? John Cena, same thing with him. Cena has earned this last ride, this last run, because of what he means to the company and what he means to the industry itself. You know what I mean? So those guys, So those guys are warranted that. And like I say, those are guys that were made stars through WWE. Goldberg made his start in a company that has been out of business for 24 years. You know what I mean? And when he was in WWE, he was a shell of who he was in WCW. You know, and like I said, of course, especially with the way his body's been broken down and everything like that. It's just like, come on now, in terms of impact compared to those other dudes, like in terms of from a long-term standpoint, not just small one time. Like, nah, you ain't it. I mean, certainly not Stone Cold either. So you can miss me with that BS as far as some farewell tour or whatever. Like, come on. But yeah, so like I said, other than that, move on from that rubbish, which was unnecessary. We had the Queen of the Ring semifinal, Jade Cargill versus Roxanne Perez. The winner of this match, Jade Cargill. If anything, I felt like this match should have been even shorter than it was. Especially since you're investing in Jade and making her this powerhouse. And there were moments where like she barely picked Roxanne up. Like, really, this is the same Jade Cargill that that picked up Nia Jax like it was nothing. I'm talking about, like, where she lifted Nia with one arm and flexed with the other. You know what I mean? And eliminated Nia by herself. This same Jade Cargill, who is an absolute dynamo. You know what I mean? Like physical dynamo. You know what I mean? Like someone who is, like I said, it's going to be a machine, a powerhouse. I mean, she's built like a statue. I mean, cut like a diamond. You know what I mean? And for her to, to have this match last longer than Roxanne. As nice as Roxanne was in NXT, this ain't the place for her. And I know that people were giving Jade a hard time. Giving her a hard time because of some spots in the match or some mistakes that she made. Like, leave her alone. Leave her alone. I mean, if anything, I would say that she has been making improvements. We finally start to see more of those, of those improvements, those growths by leaps and bounds. People online, they're saying that that Bryan Danielson isn't the trainer that they thought he was. You know what I mean? Especially when you look at where Jade is now. I'm like, could have a point. And the funny thing is, Roxanne was actually Jade's sparring partner in terms of like her training at the Performance Center when she got into WWE. You know what I mean? And so, so as far as that, and of course backstage, we saw that Finn Balor attempted to rally the remaining members of Judgment Day, following the news that Liv Morgan is going to miss several months of action after a shoulder injury that she suffered against Kairi Sane last week. And definitely see that the Judgment Day is facing their own Judgment Day, in terms of just the group just crumbling and deteriorating. I mean, it's especially with now we see it's like Raquel and Roxanne are about to be tag partners, and Public Enemies podcast. They gotta chill out with that. Got video memes about how Liv's gonna respond. Like Ron asked is Mr. Biggs. I was like, man, all right now, all right, log off, enough internet for you, for one day or 1 week. But like I said, I thought it was hilarious. But yeah, like I said, in terms of what Judgment Day is, just remains to be seen at this point. But yeah, like I said, other than that, in a very highly competitive match, surprisingly competitive, Jade Cargill defeats Roxanne. And like I said, Finn Balor, side note, he's very much a manipulator and plant seeds for removal of the Morgan, from Judgment Day. And so of course we see that Gunther responded to Goldberg, and Gunther meant, like I said, he meant business. He wasted no time. He was furious. He was absolutely furious. I was like, this is what I'm talking about. Way better promo than what Goldberg gave via an interview. Didn't even show up to the building. I mean, Gunther is ready to put this dude down, put him in the mud, in the dirt, put him away. You know what I mean? Like, Gunther is going to, like I said, Gunther's definitely going to be a Terminator. He's going to be an M. Bison and finish this dude once and for all. So, hey, look, I'm all for the ring general, baby. You know what I mean? Like the king of the ring himself, world champion. You know what I mean? Like this, like I said, of course, Gunther says, of course, said his personal responsibility to make sure that the legacy and myth of Bill Goldberg forever dies. Man, that's what I'm talking about, baby. You know what I mean? Like, and WWE wasn't even expecting the ring general to get cheered the way he did for when he killed Goldberg's legacy. So in that aspect, someone who's naturally a villain is seen as a hero right now. So I'm Team Gunther, Team Ring General all day with this. Put this dude away. You know what I mean? So in a way that Bret Hart would approve of. But yeah, like, of course, next up we have the Women's Intercontinental Championship match. Bayley versus Becky Lynch. And of course, Becky Lynch defeated Bayley by way of disqualification because of interference from Valkyria. You know what I mean? So of course, this extends their feud. Also, we saw, not to jump back and forth, we also saw Karrion Kross antagonize Sami Zayn after his loss to Randy Orton. Of course, Sami informed Karrion of their independent match made official by Adam Pearce, and of course, Scarlet Whispers got him only for only for Sami Zayn, Sami Zayn would just let it out and not carrying out. Like finally something that Kross has been begging for the longest time. So I'm glad that Sami Zayn did what he needed to do and put this dude down. I'm looking for Sami to put him down in the ring as well. But yeah, of course, we saw that Rhea Ripley brawl with Raquel Rodriguez, only ended for Raquel, to put it to the table, which would have been different. And then, of course, finally, last but not least, with the King of the Ring semifinal match with Cody Rhodes versus Jey Uso, and the winner of this match, the American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes. And so now it is time for me to give my predictions for Night of Champions. Let's see what the card is looking like. Hang on with me. Of course, it's going to take place once again in Riyadh, Saudi Arabia. Saturday, June 28th at 1 o'clock. In the middle of the day, at the peak of the day, no less. So we have, let's see, of course, for the matches, we have Sami Zayn versus Karrion Kross, Rhea Ripley versus Raquel Rodriguez in a street fight. We have Jacob Fatu versus Solo Sikoa for the United States Championship, John Cena versus CM Punk for the undisputed WWE Championship, Asuka versus Jade Cargill in the Queen of the Ring final. Looks like it's going to be great. And also Randy Orton versus Cody Rhodes in the King of the Ring final. So my predictions are this. I'm going for Sami to defeat Karrion. I want to pick Rhea to defeat Raquel in the street fight. Even though there's maybe some interference from Roxanne, but I'm leaning towards Rhea getting the victory in the street fight. So I have Sami, Rhea for the United States Championship. Samoan Werewolf, Jacob Fatu for the WWE Championship. I'm going with Cena to retain the title. For the Women's Queen of the Ring, I'm picking Jade Cargill because she needs this as a huge way to elevate herself. If anything, especially when it comes to her breaking out away from Bianca and Naomi, and like I say, just making a bigger name for herself on her own outside of the big three, outside of that storyline. So if anything, if anybody needs more, I would say it would be Jade Cargill at Asuka's expense. I know there's some people who are haters online get mad, to see a legend like Asuka go down, but but at the same time, I think it's very necessary. You know what I mean? Because Asuka's already done it all and won it all, and yeah, but the thing about it is that of course, someone like Asuka has done it all, won it all. She's a legend, and, a living legend when it comes to women's wrestling. As far as I'm concerned, Asuka is the GOAT when it comes to Japanese women's wrestlers. So, of course, Io is definitely making her name. Don't get me wrong, but Asuka is the bar. She's the standard for it. But and that would make this match for Jade even more important. You know what I mean? Because as great as Bianca is on that level, Asuka, is top 10 herself as well. You know what I mean? So as far as that'll be huge, feather in Jade's hat, or rather, a notch on her belt to get a win over a bona fide legend like Asuka. So I'm going with Jade, with that, especially with the trajectory of her career. So I'm going with Jade to win. And when it comes to Randy versus Cody, I might choose violence and go and go with Randall Keith Orton. I'm not sure how these predictions are going to turn out, but this is what I'm just throwing out there. When it comes to like I said, those are my predictions as far as that's concerned. And so another topic that I want to talk about, as we start to kind of wind down. Also, another thing is, I also want to bring up the BRP 50, and I want to say congratulations to the ruler of NXT, Mr. Oba Femi, for being ranked number 1 on Black Wrestling's BRP 50 list, for Black Wrestling Podcast, and like I said, of course, it was very well deserved. And so I'm going to go into the top 10 that was revealed since last week. And so, top 10. Top 10. 20 through 11 was Shelton Benjamin, 19 Bobby Lashley, 18 Jada Parker, 17 Carmelo Hayes, 16 Sol Ruka, 15 Willow Nightingale, 14 Jade Cargill, 13 Kevin Knight, 12 Michael Oku, 11 Myra Reed. Of course, the top 10 are AJ Francis is number 10, number 9 Sugar Dunkerton, of course number 8 Athena, number 7 Ricochet, 6 Trick Williams. Top 5 Naomi, Queen of Caution herself, has made the top 5 right at 5. This was a huge year for her. This, the momentum, is really paying off. So she's earned that the top 5 spot. So congratulations to her. She's already in the top 5 last year as well. And number 4, Darius Carter of Ashe Wrestling, who is a huge star on Indies. Someone to definitely look out for. Number 4 is Darius Carter. Number 3, EST herself, Bianca Belair. Number 2, Mercedes Moné. Mercedes, multi-belt Mercedes, if you will. And number 1, once again, the ruler himself, Oba Femi, as he calls himself on Twitter, the Nigerian Thanos. And that's definitely him. He's got the Femi gauntlet when it comes to NXT. You know what I mean? He's definitely a mad titan kaiju of wrestlers. The kaiju of wrestling right now, especially in NXT. Oh my gosh, they're just in general, period. So congratulations to him. Well deserved. And so, as far as that coverage, and also, like I said, another thing I wanted to mention as well. Also when it comes to greatness and in terms of what's the definition of greatness, and so you have the likes of you have names like names like Rock, Stone Cold, John Cena now, who for a while, especially now he's a 17th time champion. Like he was already on GOAT status anyway. But if you're looking at from the confines of strictly WWE, he has a very, very strong case, just overall career-wise standpoint, of being number one, just off of that alone, in terms of just overall body of work. Roman is the GOAT of this modern, current generation, like the post-John Cena era. Roman has cemented his place in that conversation. He's the longest running champion of the modern era. In terms of like when you look at the post Hogan era, if you were like all the way on down to what we have now, like I say, Roman Reigns had the longest reign since then. So he's definitely in that conversation as well. There's a difference between favorite and greatness. Shawn Michaels and Bret Hart are more of my favorites. Stone Cold's one of the top 3 favorites as well. But if you're talking about the GOAT between those 3, Austin has the greater GOAT case. And my overall GOAT would still be Stone Cold. Even with John Cena included. And then when it comes to the women, you look at Mercedes Moné, formerly known as Sasha Banks, where they're having multiple belts all at one time outside of WWE. How she has invested so much in herself, and made such a tremendous name outside the WWE umbrella. The same woman who said that she wanted to eat steak like Vince McMahon, looks like she has accomplished that mission thus far. And so if you want to talk about just the overall standpoint when it comes to accolades, even outside of WWE, she has a very, very strong case herself. Normally, like I said, typically I would say China, just because of how she transcended, just transcended the women's division. She's been my number one. But now I'm starting to lean a little bit more towards Charlotte, with all things considered. But like I said, of course, Mercedes, she's firmly established. Like she's always established herself, but it's just something about this that, especially with her, being the ultimate dragon, just making even more of an ironclad case. And when it comes to GOATs in the making, I'm looking at EST herself, Bianca Belair. You talk about the post-Horsewomen, post-Asuka, if you will. Bianca's, the biggest name they've had thus far. When you talk about, like star, like women's wrestlers, superstars, outside of the 4 Horsewomen and Asuka, Bianca's the best one outside of that, right? You know what I mean? So she's top 10 for sure, ironclad. Rhea is, in my estimation, between 11 and 15 if I was to rank her all time. You know what I mean? Just because of, like, not only because of her ring work, even though Bianca's a better athlete than her overall, but at the same time, in terms of strength, she's not that far behind, EST. Pretty much go hand in hand. Like in terms of, like I said, Rhea's accolades so early, at this point of her career, in terms of, like I said, in terms of what she brings to the table in the ring, her charisma, her mic skills, her presence, her aura. Like I said, Rhea Ripley, like to not mention her among the all-time greats, you are absolutely selling yourself short. You know what I mean? So yeah, like I said, Rhea is definitely solidifying her place, if not solidified it already, among the all-time greats. You know what I mean? So if we talk about strictly WWE, of course, Trish Stratus, most certainly from a cultural impact standpoint. So if somebody would put her number one, I ain't got no problem with it. You know what I mean? Just because of her influence, because of she's a 7-time women's champion, but in terms of her popularity, in terms of being named, the top women's wrestler of the 2000s, decade, you know what I mean, like stuff like that, and just how transcendent Trish is, you know what I mean, Stratisfaction, you know, so she's always going to be in that conversation, you know what I mean, so as far as that, but if you're talking about strictly accolades within the confines of the WWE, because 14-time champion, you know, and what she does in the ring, you know, in terms of also with the way that she's taken women's wrestling to the next level, you know, in terms of especially with the Four Horsewomen and just ushering in a whole new dynamic of women's wrestling. You know, people cry nepotism all they want to because they're jealous, because they wish that, you know, they had a lineage like Charlotte's. She can't help the family that, you know, the family that she was born in. But, you know, like I say, you know, with that, you can't just slight Charlotte just for her natural greatness. And so, you know, off of that, you know, I would have no problem, you know, if anybody, even myself, would have changed my mind and call Charlotte number one. You know what I mean? Like, you know, I felt like Charlotte and China pretty much 1A and 1B, rotate them. You know, Trish probably like, you know, second or third, whatever. You know what I mean? So as far as that, but like I say, Mercedes Moné, in terms of all things considered, not just WWE, but just beyond that, I mean, she has superseded so many different names. It's insane. You know, so like that. So I would say what it means to be the GOAT is, you know, like I said, you know, someone who not only has the accolades, but the impact, the influence, you know what I mean? Someone who makes others around them better, someone who has the game with skill that cannot be denied. You know, someone who moves the needle and defines or redefines their generation. And just is undeniable. You know what I mean? I don't know what other better way to say it, but you know, like I say, in that aspect, when it comes to women's wrestling, Charlotte is a very ironclad case. You know, and so, like I say, and the thing is, especially when it comes to accolades, when it comes to all those things, you know, the more boxes you check off, as I said before, the higher that you go, right? And I feel like accolades are, you know, the quantifier and just like the sort of great divider when it comes to greatness. What separates, you know, the upper echelon, you know, super icon legend figures from, you know, from those that are, you know, they're still great, but not quite in that tier. You know, it's levels to this stuff. Even Barkley himself has said there's levels to this. You know, and some people, I think they don't really quite have much of a grasp about that. But it's just like, you know, the unfair. I feel as though, you know, that's you know, that's just the nature of it right now. Which ultimately brings me to, you know, like, of course, you know, of course, you know, which also ultimately brings me to this. So, you know, so we're talking about, you know, championships and impact, popularity, and greatness, especially with the way that, you know, so about that. You know, especially when it comes to, you know, the recent narrative regarding the late great, you know, Kobe being Bryant, and you know, people want to think whether I'm, you know, taking it the wrong way or not. I don't believe I am. You know, and the reason why I say that is because, you know, I know, you know, people may take exception to what I'm about to say, but whatever. I know that, you know, like I said, you know, I know that recently, you know, like I said, Kobe's names, you know, were brought up, especially side by side with Tracy McGrady, who was one of his generational rivals, you know, dance partners, and of course, this is off the heels of LeBron's comments about rings and saying that they don't really mean as much, and so I feel as though I feel as though that narrative. I believe is I feel as though that narrative that is kind of um, taking on a life of its own, to the point where there was an episode of First Take at Fanatics Fest where apparently that was brought up, and so of course Tracy McGrady wanted to say that that he put him on that Lakers team, replace him and Kobe, and put him in Shaq, that he can get rings himself, and so in that aspect. So the report also reveals, and so sorry about that, of course, in that aspect, I guess Kobe was just an easy target for him to use as a name, to say that that he put himself in a better environment, a better team, that he could win a championship as well. But here's the thing, though. At best, I can see him getting like one with Shaq, but in terms of running off with a three-peat, not so much. And I know that Kobe has, and this is the side that I'm going to take in the argument, right? Because I know that Kobe has given T-Mac his flowers, right? Where he has said that Tracy McGrady, has the same kind of talent as him, but just taller. He's saying that T-Mac, was like the toughest thing he had to guard, things like that. But that was, I would say, strictly more so from an offensive standpoint. Could T-Mac deliver offensively? Absolutely. You know what I mean? And what's funny is, him and Gilbert definitely like to take a little snapshot of, of that little three-peat era or whatever, and cherry pick and say, and like just use that snapshot moment of time to try and make the case for him being, being a better player than Kobe, right? Never mind the fact that Kobe had an entire 12-year career after Shaq left the Lakers. Never mind that part. But we're just going to cherry pick and point to this little small snippet of their careers, and and say that like this, you try to take Shaq out the equation, all the other type of stuff, right? On one end, it's just like on one end, they want to take Shaq out the equation and just measure them side by side. On the other end, you want to throw his name in the equation in the sense that in the sense that if you would have been in Kobe's position with him, then you would have won the same number of championships and everything like that. Like, there's no shade at all whatsoever, but numbers don't lie. Now, of course, T-Mac had been a two-time scoring champion over Kobe within that window of time. Let's put it into context. Kobe played with another top 10 all-time great transcendent player in Shaquille O'Neal, right? So of course that's going to take shapes and points away from him. Even though there was that 2001 season, the 2001 season where Kobe did average, 28 points per game, and it stepped up significantly in the playoffs. In ways that they needed him the most, even times where Shaq was getting caught up in foul trouble and stuff like that. There were times where Kobe was even outperforming him. You know what I mean? And this was supposed to be the second option, type of player. And Gilbert was talking reckless and saying Kobe was being compared to Scottie Pippen. No way in the world. Scottie on his best day was not doing what Kobe was doing. You know what I mean? And so like saying just to and also for him to discredit though that discredit that three-peat, right? Um, like talking about how they don't count those. But the thing is, Kobe, even if it was the second option, those rings still carry weight. At the end of the day, like it wasn't so much in terms of the one-on-one. It was really the bigger narrative ultimately beyond the head-to-head thing. Was at the end of the day, Kobe was the one, that was celebrating at the end of the season, holding those championships, because I thought that the name of the game, ultimately at the end of the day, was to win a championship, lead your team to a championship, be a dominant player on a championship team, and Kobe did all those things, right? And the fact that this is even a point of discussion of contention when it really shouldn't be, because history speaks for itself. You know what I mean? I know that it was like, like this little side by side type of thing. It's almost like, when people try to compare, Clyde Drexler with Jordan, or Dominique Wilkins with Jordan. Yeah, they had, like sort of like a, mano a mano, one on one, battles here and there. But even beyond that, like I said, Jordan found a way to separate himself and create a larger gap between him and them. Same thing with Kobe. When it came to his peers, such as like your T-Max, your Iversons, your Vince Carters, you know what I mean? Like, of course, there's that like friendly competition and stuff like that in terms of, argument here and there. But in the long run, there were things that Kobe did in terms of his game, in terms of his defense, in terms of his discipline, in terms of his work ethic, like that paid off, and it showed up in his performance, which separated him from the rest of the pack, right? Far and away, and the thing is, of course, I mean, yeah, and like I said, because Kobe played who he played with, because who his teammate was, naturally he wasn't going to be, the league's leading scorer at that point. You know what I mean? Whereas with someone like T-Mac, it was all him. Um, Now by 03, Kobe's scoring average went up higher to, he was from 30 points per game to T-Mac's 32.1. All right, cool, whatever. You know what I mean? Like I said, at the same time, look what we played with, right? But also, if you want to prove, if you want to show that you're so much of a better player than him side by side, why is it that T-Mac never made it out the first round of the playoffs? He never won a playoff series as the lead man, not once. But yet you want to put yourself in Kobe's position and say that you were somehow on the same level as him, if not maybe comparable, if not slightly better, but at the same time, it's just like, all right, but because they're mainly measuring points per game, right? But when it comes to their overall historical matchups, like I said, when it comes to win-loss record, Kobe's gotten beaten that. When it comes to when it comes to career points per game overall, Kobe's gotten beat with that. But even when it comes to all-star selections, especially when it comes to all defensive selections, like I say, T-Mac was never considered an all defensive player. Kobe should have cleared him when it came to those all defensive selections. I mean, we're talking about player for player, that you got to include everything, right? So, like I said, Kobe was more complete in that aspect. Like I said, not just when it comes to just sheer, like I said, one-on-one offensive thing, but when it came to his defense, like I said, he was like when it comes to that, when it comes to being a perennial all-star, when it came to all NBA first teams, Kobe crushed him with that as well. And so like I said, and it just off of his own strength, Kobe, like I said, was still taking him to school. And so, the thing is, I know people are saying, guys like Tracy, and Gilbert to speak on that, because they were his peers, they played with him and things like that. Whatever. Like I see, yada 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 yada, so they can speak on them whatever the case is. But the fact that Nick Young had to be the voice of reason in that room, was very telling. And so the thing is, when people say that, I could counter that and say, guess what? Allen Iverson was drafted with Kobe. He's played against him multiple times. You never, ever, ever hear Iverson talk about him the way these dudes are talking about him. He gives him his flowers, the utmost respect. Doesn't say, give little snarky comments about, about not having a ring, and if he was in Kobe's position as that third, whatever. Ultimately, he knew there was competition, but at the same time, he conceded and knew who the better player was, who the better man was. You know what I mean? So the thing is, Allen Iverson was not ashamed to admit that as great as he was, Kobe was just someone that was just better than him. And Kobe himself even said that if Iverson was 6'5" or 6'6", he'd be super unstoppable. But yeah, like I said, and the thing is, for them to, to target Kobe like that so much, I'm like, it's very telling, especially since they didn't have the same energy. Like I said, I doubt that that they really kept this much type of energy or had this type of venom, when Kobe was still here on Earth. You know what I mean? And so I'm not a fan of that. You know what I mean? Like I said, someone like Iverson was definitely taking the high road. Vince Carter, like he spoke highly of him as well. You know what I mean? So it's just like, come on now. Like I said, why are we arguing with what is already in the history books? The record speaks for itself. And like I said, and the thing is, even after Shaq left, like I said, Kobe had an entire 12-year career after Shaq left. And so within that time frame, Kobe's game elevated. He was carrying, he showed that he could carry a team on his own. Of course, to the point where where they had 3 straight finals appearances. Of course, Kobe won 2 out of 3. With back-to-back finals MVPs as well, along with the league MVP also. You know what I mean? So as far as that, so of course, like I said, Kobe's trajectory went upwards, whereas T-Mac's trajectory went down because of his injuries. There was even a point where with T-Mac, especially during those back-to-back, especially later on, especially during those back-to-back Laker years, I've seen T-Mac's scoring diminish. There was even a point where he was injured so much that he started to average 8 points per game. 8 points per game. Come on now. Like I said, what are we talking about? Like I say, it's post 2004, everything like that. I've seen Kobe's trajectory shot up, went up, and proved that he could be an alpha. Proved that he could be the lead man on his own. I've seen where someone like T-Mac, his body broke down. You know what I mean? Like he showed that he couldn't carry a franchise as the lead guy. And that's just the way it is. You know what I mean? There's levels to greatness. And when they talk about rings, it's more so the star players that are being evaluated rather than, your role players like the Robert Horrys and stuff like that, and Kenny Smiths or whatever. They're not the ones that are being, whose legacies and careers are being, are being measured or evaluated in terms of where they stand in that, among greatness. In that, pantheon and stuff. It's the guys who, who are the lead players, franchise players, all stars and things like that. Those are the ones, where the championships matter the most. I mean, so if you're a star player, your ring carries more weight. You know what I mean? So like I say, it's one thing if you're a great player, but it's another thing if you are a great player that has contributed to leading a championship team. Plain and simple. Like I said, championships and numbers go hand in hand. That's what that is. Like I said, the more dominant you are, along with leading a championship team, the higher you go. So this is not rocket science. You know what I mean? Like the fact that people are still talking about this is not rocket science. Kobe solidified his all-time great in the fact that like, in the idea that the fact that you have guys, former players, his peers are like Kobe's own peers, like guys that played against him, whatever. Um, Taking this narrative that that LeBron has ran with, and they've run with it themselves, so they could feel comfortable about their shortcomings, so they could feel comfortable and make their own selves feel secure about where they are, and like it's, even though they couldn't get the job done, even though they fell short numerous times, because they were in Kobe's shadow. You know what I mean? So if anything, I believe that that they took that, so so they could feel complacent, and at the same time, show a certain level of jealousy. You know, so like I say, it's just like there's levels to this stuff. There is levels to this, plain and simple. If you don't see it, I don't know what else to say. You know what I mean? And so, in Kobe's era, he was, outside other than Shaq and Tim Duncan, but in the long run, I would say that he became that generational defining player, and there are guys who are not secure enough in themselves to admit, that they were in his shadow. At the end of the day, with the way the history is, fair, unfair, they were just in his shadow. And so once again, there's levels. There's levels to GOAT status. Plain and simple. Much like how there were people in Stone Cold's era, Stone Cold and Rock's era, and Cena's era. For Roman, like there were people that were in their shadow. There were wrestlers who were nice in their own right, but they, like the thing is, it's just like, like I said, the gap between them and who the GOAT was for them. So now it's just like night and day. You know what I mean? Much like how, you look at guys like, guys like Chris Carter or Michael Irvin in comparison to Jerry. It's like night and day. The gap is like this. You know what I mean? It's just, whoever it is, you name it. Actually, there's just, guys are just once in a lifetime, once in a generation, and they're just leagues head and shoulders above the rest. And in Kobe's aspect, especially when it came to, perimeter players, like this dude was in a league of his own. It's like Jordan's number one shooting guard, Kobe's number two, right, directly next to him on his heels, and then everybody else find a place in line. Plain and simple, case closed, the end. So, yeah, but of course, with that being said, that concludes this episode. And before I go, I would like to give some birthday shout outs. Like I said, do a few birthday shout outs. On June 20th, Kira Shear Kelly turned 38. On June 21st, Chris Pratt, also in the Star Wars from Guardians of the Galaxy, turned 46. June 22nd, Clyde the Glide Drexler turned 63. The late great Mr. Pete Maravich would have turned 78. Portia from Housewives of Atlanta turned 44. Bruce Campbell, also known as Ash Williams, from, of course, Ash from Evil Dead, turned 67. Meryl Streep turned 76. On June 23rd, director Josh Whedon, turned 61. June 24th, Solange turned 39, and Lionel Messi turned 38. And so, of course, that's it when it comes to birthdays. And before I go, I'd like to give him a word of wisdom, and it is to count it all joy. I see the good, the bad, and the ugly, um, because I see because of the fact that God is going to use all those things for the greater good, for your testimony. You know what I mean? So knowing that knowing that knowing that your faith produces patience, and you'll be rewarded for it. You know what I mean? So like I said, so the thing is count everything. Like in order so that it will be create a bigger testimony and opens up even greater blessings. So once again, count it all joy. So that's my word of wisdom. Also remember that you are victorious because greater is He that is in you than he that is in the world. When you put God in first place, you don't have to worry about being in last place. And of course, also want to pray for pray for our country when it comes to this everything that's going on with this nation. But of course, thank you very much. But you can also follow. Excuse me. You can also want to listen to us. Listen to the podcast on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts. You can also catch this podcast on YouTube. So you can listen on iTunes, Spotify, Google Podcasts, watch on YouTube. So thank you very much for listening. Thank you very much for watching. And may this day be the very best day of your life.